If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Kath Bequee. I'm a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I help women feel confident and strong inside out as they navigate pregnancy, birth, and postnatal recovery. Each week, I bring you 2 episodes to support you on your motherhood journey, whether it's real and raw birth stories from fellow mums, expert interviews with trusted health professionals, or bite-sized Q&As where I answer your most common questions. It is possible to feel amazing in your body during this stage of life, and I want that for you. Come and say hi on Instagram at kathbequee.physio, and let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome back to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. Today's episode is all about supplementing with formula when breastfeeding. So a little bit of background. I am chatting with Jaimie Zaki, who is a nurse, a doula, a mum of 5, and international board certified lactation consultant based in America. And Jaimie is also the host of the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast, where she answers common breastfeeding questions. I was recently on Jaimie's podcast as a guest discussing the use of therapeutic ultrasound with mastitis, and Jaimie has we've lined up a time to chat. And the way it is, like in the podcasting world, I try to be as organized as possible, getting a range of guest speakers and experts in certain topics. And I try to, for example, have a doctor and then perhaps a breastfeeding consultant and then a dietitian. So I try to have a range and have a little bit of a gap between the different specialties. But sometimes it's just the nature of the podcast and trying to deal with different schedules and calendars, and there's so many reasons, but sometimes it doesn't quite go according to plan and we get 2 similar podcasts back to back. So in this situation, I've just chatted and published a podcast with the amazing Nicola, who's based in Australia, about how to set yourself up for breastfeeding success. And in this conversation today with Jaimie, we were going to initially talk about the similar thing. The topic was going to be how to prepare during pregnancy for breastfeeding success, even when things don't go according to plan. But the conversation took a bit of a turn when we just started discussing introducing formula. And I thought, this is amazing. I haven't had a topic on formula and ways to introduce formula that can support the mother and the breastfeeding journey, and there's so many different things at play. So this is where the conversation led. So in this conversation today with Jaimie, she discusses before introducing formula, looking for certain red flags. She looks at what she calls a smart supplementing method, and she discusses ways to introduce formula and things to be aware of. And I think it'll be a really valuable episode for any mother listening or anyone who might be considering or might need to consider formula at some stage or other in their breastfeeding journey. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you can share this podcast with a friend, that is amazing, because I don't run ads to the podcast, and it's really the only way to get this podcast listened by more people and to help support the podcast so that I can continue to run the podcast is to share it with friends, share it on your socials, or even just do a rating and review. It really helps me to be able to maintain this podcast for so many different reasons. So thank you again. I really thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'm honored listening to reading each and every rating and review. And It's one of my favorite things to do in the week. So without further ado, let's have a chat. Let's dive into this episode today with Jaimie, where we're discussing supplementing breastfeeding with formula. Jaimie, thank you so much for joining me on the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast. It's great to have you on. I know we recently spoke as well for your amazing podcast. Today we're discussing advocacy in the birth suite, specifically centered around the breastfeeding side of things. So, great topic, and one that we probably don't talk about that much. When I asked you to put forward a list of questions, what made you draw, what drew you to this topic?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I am so excited to just connect with you, connect with other moms. And you're right, this is not something we talk about enough. And I always think of how moms prepare and spend so much time preparing for their birth and their baby. And they get very excited to breastfeed. They're like, yes, of course I'm going to breastfeed. And they put breastfeeding on their birth plan. But the big mistake they make is they put it on their birth plan like it's a box to check off, not like it's actually kind of the end goal. And that sounds maybe a little dramatic, but for moms who intend to breastfeed and plan to breastfeed, you're going to be breastfeeding for longer than you were pregnant if everything goes well, right? If you're following the guidelines that like the Academy of Pediatrics and World Health Organization say, you should be breastfeeding for a year or 2 years. So why aren't we putting more thought and preparation into it? And specifically when that we start talking about preparing for breastfeeding, we have to talk about advocating for breastfeeding in the hospital, because the truth is the hospital is where breastfeeding gets thrown off track most frequently. I last year I was looking at some statistics for the United States, and there was one that I had found, and I really wish I had saved the link because I have not been able to find it. I like dug, and was like, whoa. And it was on the CDC website. And they said that 80% of mothers in the United States start out breastfeeding. Of those 80%, 20% are given formula within the first day or two of life. And most of the time, it's not necessary that early. So if that's where breastfeeding is getting thrown off track, we moms have to be prepared to advocate, but they go into it thinking that their nurses and doctors are going to help them breastfeed and set them up for success. And they think they're all on the same team. They don't realize that that resource might not be providing the support they need.
Yeah, interesting. And I would love to know what it is for Australia. I might even pause this, look into our Australian Breastfeeding Association. I'm sure I've read those stats, and I don't think they're that much better, if at all, with what you just said. But yeah, I'll endeavour to find what it is in Australia. It's not great, is it? Did you know one of the best ways to support your postpartum recovery is through exercising carefully during pregnancy and preparing your body for birth? And this is something we cover inside Fitness Mama. This is what fitness is all about with its physio-created workouts. We help you support your changing body during pregnancy, whether or not that's with pelvic girdle pain-friendly workouts, whether or not that's with strength training for pregnancy or pregnancy yoga. We help you to prepare your body for birth and reduce your risk of 3rd and 4th degree perineal tears and episiotomy. And we help to boost your postpartum recovery, whether or not you've had a vaginal or a cesarean birth. If this is something you want to do, then come and check out our free 7-day trial. You've got nothing to lose, everything to gain. And at the end of the day, it's all about helping us have a better motherhood experience, to help us feel stronger inside out in every aspect of our life: physical, mental health, confidence. Anyway, I could keep on going, but come and check out the link in the show notes and join our free 7-day trial. See you soon.
It's honestly for Australia, the United Kingdom, the United States, it's all kind of
All the same.
It's very similar, and
Yeah.
it's frustrating because you think we're supposed to be the best of the best. So why aren't we
Yeah.
figuring out this one?
Okay, so what's going wrong, do you think?
I think there's a lot of things going wrong. I think on a societal level, we have kind of been separated from that ingrained wisdom. For generations, we had wisdom passed down from grandmothers to granddaughters.
Mm,
And after the Industrial Revolution, breastfeeding became very not in fashion, and formula feeding was the go-to. It's what all the doctors were being taught. There's a lot of industrial overlap with the formula industry and medical school training. So there's a lot of for lack of better words, corruption and bias. And if you're putting all of your trust and faith into doctors, which we should be able to, but their training isn't based in clear, unbiased science, but rather industry funded data, then I'm trying to find
So,
the right
so
words here.
are you saying a lot of doctors in America suggest still to this day suggest formula right from the start with that for no other
I would
reason?
I would say that they suggest formula as the solution to breastfeeding issues instead of as a tool or as a stepping stone. I think they suggest formula as a crutch because they don't think that they can dig deeper into breastfeeding. They don't understand the ins and outs of
Mm,
what's making breastfeeding difficult. And it's just much easier and, in their opinion, often more compassionate to say, just use formula. Stop trying so hard. It's not that big of a deal. It's just as good. And this is not to formula shame at all. Anybody who's listening, I am not formula shaming at all. I have so many clients who use formula as part of their journey. I have so many clients that I have to tell them, like, we need to use formula for part of your journey. And then we'll work back to exclusive breastfeeding. But it has to be done with a plan. It has to be done wisely. And just throwing it as the solution is really the problem.
mm. Okay, Jamie, you've totally piqued my interest there. I was just saying to you off air, it's like I don't like to really script these because I like to see where the conversation goes. And that is a topic I know a lot of mums listening to are really interested in.
Mhm.
I have relatively recently done a podcast episode with a lovely lactation international board certified lactation consultant discussing breastfeeding success in those first 24-48 hours. And I was a little bit worried that there'd be quite a lot of overlay with these two episodes. But that, what you just said then, if you're happy, I'm totally pulling the rug out from under you here. But I would love to dive into, like, I know there's a lot of mums listening who really, really want to breastfeed exclusively,
Mhm.
but for whatever reason, they are struggling. So can we talk through that journey of, I guess, setting up the foundation, briefly setting up those foundations, advocating for yourself so that hopefully you can exclusively breastfeed. But if things don't go according to plan, how can we successfully, as you said, bring in formula without
Yeah.
disrupting breastfeeding as much as possible?
Yeah, that it's a really good question because a lot of moms, I mean, you look at the statistics, most moms do find themselves considering or using formula at some point in their journey. So, first of all, you have to set yourself up for success from the start before your baby is born, while you are pregnant, maybe even before you get pregnant, to be completely honest, just with re-educating yourself, realizing, the system is not built to help you breastfeed. It simply isn't. That's one of the biggest mistakes I think people make and it's the mistake that I made as a first time mom. I was a nurse. I was like, I understand breast is best, quote unquote. And if it doesn't work, my doctors will help me because they're all breastfeeding friendly. It's a breastfeeding friendly hospital. My pediatrician has a lactation consultant. And at the end of the day, none of them were equipped to help me in the way that we needed help because we needed to pull back and we needed to figure out the root cause of what was going on. And nobody was willing to do that. Nobody was equipped, educated, or skilled enough to do that where I lived. So we kind of get in this, like I said before, this cycle where the providers are not educated in properly supporting breastfeeding. The parents are putting all their faith and trust and hope in those doctors. And so the doctors, like, they have to do something. So they offer formula. So, first of all, just like re-educating yourself on not being dependent on the system, using the system as a tool, but also preparing yourself outside of that system, taking classes, reading all the books, listening to the podcasts, talking to moms who struggled but overcame, I think is really important, because we talk to a lot of moms who struggled and didn't overcome, and that is nothing against them, but they're going to have a different story to tell, right? And it's not always going to be supportive of our goals when they're bringing their lack of support into the advice. Um, and just making sure that you know the right questions to ask, you learn how to advocate for yourself. You're learning how to do that for your birth. It really does translate into breastfeeding. It really does translate into the rest of motherhood. So it's just learning how to ask those questions and kind of, keep going back to, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And if somebody says, I don't know, then that doesn't mean they're a bad provider. It just means you might need a different provider, and that's okay too. Nobody is an expert in everything. Nobody has all the answers, but you have to make that decision to use formula confidently, right? That has to come from, I always say, moms need to make their feeding decisions from a place of confidence, which is where intuition and information collide. So you have to first feel that this is the right thing. You have to know you're not making this decision out of fear, and being pressured and being bullied. Like, it should be a free decision. You don't have to be happy about it. You don't have to be like, yes, this is totally what I want. But you have to know, like, in your heart that you're doing the right thing and not be angry at yourself. I find that the moms who are very angry at themselves, it's usually because they're still thinking, well, what if? Should I? Like, they just didn't know who to ask those things to.
So are there certain
Sorry,
things...
I'm just talking really fast.
Yeah. No, it's great. Are there... And I was, I don't know if I want to get into my story, but I refused to top up with formula for 6 months. I was like, I can do this. And I got the support. I don't think I probably got the right support, but I did my best to seek support. And then when I gave my first bottle of formula at 6 months, for the first time in 6 months, I had a really contented, happy baby. And I was like, oh my God, I think I've actually starved my baby for the last 6 months. I think she's been really unhappy. And I just haven't been, this is my first baby. It did not have that issue with my second or third baby at all. But for my first one, I don't think I was producing enough milk, and she was starving. But I also felt really guilty that I had to use the formula. So there's this massive amount of guilt. So for women who are thinking, okay, maybe I need to consider formula, are there certain things you would recommend that they consider first before getting to that point?
Yeah. Well, first of all, definitely we need to know the red flags to look for. We need to know what those red flags are, right? I think everybody is just kind of like, oh, my baby's fussy, colicky, breastfeeding's not working. That means that I'm starving them. And that's not always true. And then, like I said, we need to kind of start looking at why, right? If we're seeing all these red flags, we need to understand why. What's causing these red flags? There can be a lot of different factors at play. I don't want to go too deep into that because it can get very complex. But that's what I'm telling you. Like, it is so much more complex than asking a mommy group or asking ChatGPT. Like, it can be really complex. And so working with somebody who knows how to sit down with you and take the time to investigate what's going on is important. And there are so many wonderful, supportive people out there who are just going to keep saying, oh, it's fine. That's normal. It's meant to be. Like, that's just babies. Just keep trying. And they mean well, but they're still not finding answers. If you have questions and you need answers, keep pushing till you get answers. And then when it comes to supplementing and making that decision, I actually have a section in my breastfeeding resource library called SMART Supplementing, because there are so many things you have to consider. And SMART is an acronym for the supplementation method, amount, reason, and timing. So you want to make sure that the methods you are using are supportive of breastfeeding. So you don't necessarily have to use a bottle. Depending where you are in your breastfeeding journey, you could use cup feeding, syringe feeding, Some people will use a tube at the breast so that they never have to put their baby to a bottle. If their baby is latching and just isn't getting enough, they can supplement at the breast. It can be a pain in the butt to learn, and there's a learning curve, but there are a lot of women who love that option. Um, and then you can talk about, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna, because I want to dive into this more. But you did just mention a few red flags, which I know we don't want to go into detail. But do you have a rough list of red flags to consider before we start this smart supplementing?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, the big things that you're going to want to look out for are, is your baby pooping enough? Are they peeing enough? Like, we want to make sure they're getting plenty of poop and pee diapers, which for the first week of life is one per day of life. And then past that, about 5 to 6 a day, seven, eight. Really, they should be pooping and peeing every time they're feeding, ideally. But if we're getting that 6+ a day, that's a good sign. Um, and then we want to track their weight gain. We want to make sure that they're staying on their curve, on their growth curve. If they're crossing those lines, the growth charts have like large lines, these bold lines. And if they're crossing those bold lines, that's a sign that your baby's really not getting enough milk. There's always going to be a little bit of fluctuation up and down. They were sick and didn't eat well for a week. And like we have to take those things into consideration. I don't like going based off pump output unless you're exclusively pumping. If you're exclusively pumping and not getting enough milk, then that's something to consider. Um, it's there's a lot to look for, but those are the most quantifiable ones that I tell
Yeah.
people to look for first.
So what about, and sorry to take this back to my
It's
first baby,
okay. No,
who's
let's
now
talk
nearly
about
13,
it.
and I'm happy to say she's got no more breastfeeding issues. But I say that with a bit of tongue in cheek, just because at the time it's scary and it's so consuming, and you lose sleep over it. But
Mhm.
as my kids get older, I am quickly realizing it's all but a moment in time, and this too shall pass, and nothing is forever. So I find that really comforting to know. Anyway, back to my bubs. She didn't have great weight gain. She did have good pooing and weeing. And in that situation, I was thought the more I fed, the more I would produce. And I thought if I started supplementing, then that would reduce how much I was producing myself. So although her weight gain wasn't great, and that was my concern. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
about that?
I would say if I had been your lactation consultant, I would have been looking at why she's not gaining weight well. If she's pooping plenty, is she sometimes we'll see babies poop a lot, but they're basically pooping it all out, right? Like maybe they're not absorbing nutrients well. Maybe they just aren't getting enough, but they're getting enough to poop and pee, but not enough to poop and pee and maintain their weight, which is
Yeah.
not uncommon. And the first thing I look at isn't necessarily is mom not making enough milk, but more so is baby getting enough milk? Because if the baby's not removing enough milk, then that's going to lower your supply. So then we want to talk about um, pumping after feeding to help increase supply or maintain feeding. And then we want to make sure that pump is actually fitting properly and the right suction, because so many moms are using a poorly fitted pump and they're like, well, I
Yeah.
can't get my milk supply up. I'm not getting anything. And their flange sizes are all wrong. And 10 years ago, 13 years ago, they
There
didn't
was only
have different
one.
flange
No.
sizes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Good to know. So there's a lot to it.
There
Right.
is a lot
Let's
to
move.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to smart supplementing. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
of
That's
course.
a really good first. Some really good points for people to consider before then considering a smart supplementing. So you got up to the M with the method,
Yes,
and
yes.
my
So we
mind
have this.
boggled.
Yeah, sorry. We have the supplementing method, which it could be bottles. It doesn't have to be bottles. You want to make sure if it is bottles that the bottles are the right kind for your baby. There are some bottles that um, are heavily promoted, very popular, that actually are not great for babies who are struggling with oral dysfunction or who are breastfeeding, and we want to promote good breastfeeding mechanics with the bottle. So we want to make sure that we're using the right bottle for our baby and our goals if we do use a bottle. We want to make sure that we are using paced feeding if we're using a bottle. And then we want to talk about not just the vehicle for feeding baby when we talk about supplementing method, but also the kind of milk. So are you supplementing with your mother's milk, expressed mother's milk? Are you supplementing with donor milk? You can get donor milk privately in the hospital. Sometimes they have donor milk options. You can, are you going to use formula? When it comes to formula, what kind are you going to use? Are you going to use the Enfamil on the shelf, or are you going to get an organic kind, or are you going to make your own formula? There's a lot of people who, it's very controversial, so I'm not going to say one way or the other, but there are some homemade formula recipes that are pretty well done. There's one brand of formula that actually is like, I can't remember what it's called, and I'm so frustrated that I'm not remembering this now, but it's a goat milk based formula that um it basically is everything that you would add to goat milk to make it acceptable for human infants. So, I mean, there's a lot of different options out there, and you have to weigh them and think about the safety and the ingredients and what aligns with you. And I mean, they have plant-based formulas, which are a little interesting to me. I've read the ingredients on those, and I'm not sure that they are um, what I would choose, but there's options. There's so many options out there for the supplementing method alone. And then you have to make sure you're supplementing the right amount. You have to, how do you know how much to supplement? That's going to depend on your baby's age. It's going to depend on how much your baby is gaining and how much breast milk they are getting. And then what you need to, so that math is going to have to be done with somebody who knows what they're doing. Lactation consultant is usually a good person to go to for that. And then you want to have a good reason. You want to know what the reason is. If the reason is because you're afraid, because your baby's crying a whole lot, or because somebody told you to, and you don't have a good solid reason, I recommend getting a good solid reason. And sometimes that's good solid reason is, this is just what I want to do. And if that's your reason, that's fine. But you have to make sure that your reasons for supplementing are aligned with your goals for breastfeeding and your reasons for breastfeeding. And then the timing matters. When are you giving these bottles? Are you giving them before feeding? Are you giving them after feeding? All of that matters. Are you giving them while feeding? If you're doing the supplemental nursing system, you can be supplementing while feeding. And so that helps a lot of moms who are stuck in like a triple feeding cycle where they have to breastfeed, bottle feed, then pump, and they have this whole cycle. Using that supplemental nursing system can just kind of remove one of those steps and, combine steps. I guess it wouldn't be removing, it would be combining steps to make things easier and feeling more connected instead of feeling like you're a dairy cow hooked up to a machine that's then passed along.
Yeah. So to read between the lines, you've pretty much said if you're going to start supplementing, you want to be informed and feel confident that it's the right decision. And if you feel neither informed nor confident, then seek support. The support you need so that you can feel informed and confident. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And you're not always going to find that support at the doctor's office or the local hospital. I hate to say that. There are great hospital and like doctor's office lactation consultants out there and breastfeeding specialists and nurses. They are out there. I do not want to sound like I'm speaking badly against anybody, but time and time again, the women that I work with tell me they already used all the resources they were told they should use, they were told should help them, and they didn't help them.
And so you'd suggest an international board certified lactation consultant like yourself. Is that right?
I would. Yeah. But within that, there's still always a range of providers that are more competent, less competent, more skilled, less skilled. So you need to just, ask them about their experience, ask for reviews from friends and family that are local. And then just, you have your own experience. And if they help you, wonderful. They're great. If they leave you with more questions than answers and you don't feel like you're getting the support you
Mm.
need. Don't just assume that you're broken or they can't, or like nobody can help you. It's just they
Yeah.
couldn't help you.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And I guess in this day and age, like we're lucky because like there's lacans that like there's the internet which can easily show us which lactation consultants are close by. But if we live regionally or rurally, there's telehealth as well. So, we could even have consultations with people in different countries, or like ease of information is so much easier now than
It
even
really is.
2 years,
Honest,
2 decades ago. Yeah.
it is. It's crazy to me when I think about it because when my son was born 10 years ago, I was living in a really small town in like a rural area and there was only one, excuse me, there was only one lactation consultant. And when she wasn't able to help me after I like threw fits and was like, why don't you help me better?
Mm.
Um, I didn't have anybody I could call. I ended up,
Yeah.
my mom drove me 8 hours back to our hometown to get help. And I was lucky
Yeah.
that she was there to help me, but not everybody has that. And so I
Yeah.
love that, like today, like I helped a mom in Ohio today. I helped a mom in
Mm.
Alaska a few months ago. Like being able to help moms anywhere
Yeah.
if they don't have support local to them it's really amazing that we're able to do that.
And it's why this podcast, like one of the reasons I created this podcasts weren't a thing with my first baby, like, or maybe they were. I just never listened to them 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And I would not have thought, like, I didn't, the podcast is such an amazing source of information. I do think sometimes it can add to the overwhelm and the noise out there. But yeah, just even having this conversation and people being aware, oh, I can actually Google, different, like to find
Yeah.
out which providers are close to me, or I can call a few different ones and see if I have develop a good relationship with them and want to do a
Yeah,
consultation. Like it's fantastic.
it is. And
Yeah.
the cool thing too is getting to talk to people like you in another country to see like what is similar, what is different, because then moms hear that, right? And they're like,
Mm.
wait, we don't have that. And then they can start demanding things. We can come together and start demanding what we need in our area if it's not a thing.
Mm. Yes, we were talking for your podcast about what we were discussing.
It was the
Just
ultrasound, the breast ultrasound. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And in America, it's not easy to just go to a women's health clinic and have therapeutic ultrasound if you've got mastitis. Whereas
Yeah.
here in Australia, you don't need a referral to go and see a
Yeah.
physiotherapist. So, yeah, it's interesting. Right, we digress. So, going back to supplementing while feeding. We've discussed the smart supplementation, you've discussed the different methods. One thing I was wanting to dive into a little bit more, you mentioned how much to use, and you said do
Mhm.
it in consultation with lactation consultant, which I totally agree with. But are there any quick indicators where you're perhaps providing too much or too little supplementation in addition to your breast milk?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, if the baby's not finishing the bottle, if they're spitting up a whole lot afterward, and they're not typically spitters, you might need to slow that bottle down first and then see what they want. Just because they're crying afterward doesn't mean they necessarily want to eat. Crying is what they use as their communication for a lot of different things. And sometimes it's not that they're hungry, sometimes it's that they are very gassy because no matter how they eat, whether it's at the breast or the bottle, they're getting a lot of air because they have oral dysfunction issues that can impact their whole nervous system. And so then they're just the smallest thing can set them off. So be careful with assuming that just because they're fussy, they want more to eat. Because I have seen moms that are like, all right, I know she's getting a lot at the breast. And then I give her a bottle and she takes 3 more ounces and she's screaming. So I must have to give her more. And I
Yeah.
definitely caution against that.
Oh, and I'm laughing because my first, I think I starved to death. So with my second, I assumed I also had that issue. But then I kept feeding her when she was upset. And I was feeding her so much, she was then vomiting it all up. So I think I was overfeeding this one and
Yeah.
causing exactly what you were saying, like stomach. I wasn't perhaps burping her enough. And yeah, so
Yeah,
I totally hear.
it's a balance. It's a balance. And you know what? If you're not getting it right, that's okay because nobody gets it right all the time. I always say that none of this has to be perfect in order to be positive. And I think sometimes we cling to that picture of perfect, that every little thing that goes wrong feels 100,000 times worse than it is.
Yeah.
And like you said, this is a moment in time. It's a very important moment in time. It is a
Yeah.
very impactful moment in time, but it is a moment in time and you will figure out something that works. And kind of like your experience and my experience, if it's not perfect and it doesn't work and it takes us a way too long to figure it out at first, sometimes we have a second chance. Sometimes you get a second chance. No, but for real, like you're gonna have breastfeeding. I always say birth and breastfeeding. It's really just training you for the rest of motherhood. There's going to be
Yeah.
other things after your baby is no longer breastfeeding that feel just as life or death and that you have
Yeah.
just as little control over. And you're going to have to learn resilience in working through those challenges. And I think learning how to advocate for yourself and your baby during birth and breastfeeding really equips you later on when your child is having health
Yeah.
issues or an emergency. Like a quick side note, my son was 2 years old and he broke his leg and he ended up in shock trauma. Like it was really bad. And they wanted to give him all these medications. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. That sounds like a little much for a 2 year old. And I pushed back and I asked the questions and I kept asking the questions. And I had, at that point, because I had learned how to fight through advocating for myself in birth and
Yeah.
breastfeeding so much, I was no longer afraid of the doctors. I no longer looked at them as authority. I looked at them as a teammate, and we needed to come
Yeah.
to an understanding. And
Yeah.
that equipped, like, I felt more prepared to have those conversations in that high stress moment. And I
Yeah.
ended up having a doctor come to me afterward, and he was like, I know that got really dramatic and was stressful, but you did the right thing. And if it was my kid, I would have made the same decision. And so,
Yeah.
like, it's just for anybody
Yeah.
listening, like, it's not just about breastfeeding, it's not just about give a bottle, it's about
Yeah.
learning how to advocate.
And you know what they say about like motherhood is matrescence. The becoming of a mother doesn't happen as soon as your baby's born. Like
No.
motherhood teaches you a lot of skills in life, and I think you said as what you said, resilience is one massive skill. And even now, my kids are at the older stage where there's a lot of sibling, arguments and or not rivalry, but we've got a very noisy house, and it's another
Oh,
skill set that I feel I'm learning, and it just doesn't stop. But you're right. We're very hard on ourselves as parents, and what you said at the start, like if we don't get it right, I think as mums we do tend to be very hard on ourselves. Even like with pelvic floor issues, if a woman has pelvic floor dysfunction after birth or have had a prolapse, it's like we feel guilty. We feel like we've brought it on ourselves, and as we say with the baby's learning a whole new set of skills, and so are we. And it does get easier for your second. Well, I assume you'd probably know this more than me, and for my third, it was absolute milking machine and felt really confident. But it is absolutely a transition.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's funny because I have had a lot of clients who are on their third or fourth or fifth baby, and they're like, I'm not new to this. Why is this so hard?
yeah.
And
The
the
baby's
difference,
different.
the difference is though, they know how to ask for help. They know how to ask for
True.
help. So they work through it. I hate to say like experienced moms tend to work through their breastfeeding issues better, but breastfeeding itself might not be easier. But I do see that moms who
Yeah,
have been through it a couple times are a little more willing to ask for help, a little more willing to accept like there might be things we need to change. It's not a personal attack and
yeah,
more uh proactive in implementing those care plans.
yeah. True. Good point. Right. to finish it up, Jaimie, is there anything we haven't discussed that you wanted to when it comes to supplementing the formula and breastfeeding?
No, just kind of back to how we started the whole thing, talking about advocating for yourself in the birth suite, because a lot of this supplementation pressure does start there. Just understanding how the birth interventions that you choose can impact breastfeeding. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't choose certain interventions. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that like if you had certain interventions, you're going to destroy breastfeeding. It just means that if breastfeeding is really hard in those first couple days, sometimes we can look at some of the interventions you had from birth and see that there's a connection there. Like maybe your baby is not actually losing a whole bunch of weight. They just had an inflated birth weight because you had a heck of a lot of IV fluids after a 72-hour labor. Like there's so many things, and just understanding that there's connections there, and it doesn't mean that you're failing. It just, there's a reason, and now we can act when we know that reason can make a really big difference in confidently advocating for yourself when the pressure to supplement does come up.
Yeah, brilliant. Jaimie, how can anyone listening today find you?
Yeah, so come join me on the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast. That is the best place to hang out with me because I share a ton of expert insight like you. I had you on my show, and a ton of other experts, from sleep experts to pelvic floor experts, like so many different experts are coming to share their wisdom. But then I also answer all of those frequently asked questions about breastfeeding. Is it too late to increase my milk supply? My baby is not latching. Is it too late to teach my baby how to latch? My doctor said we'll never get it, but my baby is 4 weeks old. Is there hope? I answer all of those questions on my podcast. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I am Little Bear Lactation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Jaimie. Great conversation. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Okay, catch you soon. Thanks for listening to the Pregnancy, Birth and Recovery podcast, brought to you by Fitness Mama, your app for home-based, physio-led pregnancy and postnatal workouts. If you found this episode helpful, please tap follow, leave a quick review, and share it to your stories. Tag at kathbequee.physio. I'd love to connect and cheer you on. And don't forget to check out the free trial at fitnessmama.com/free to start feeling confident, strong, and supported today. Until next time, remember, a strong body, a confident birth, and empowered recovery is something you deserve. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for individual medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider for your personalised guidance.